Thanks so much for joining us today. So my name's Julie Petty. I work with Seafood Industry Australia as the Aquaculture Policy and Project Officer. I'm joined today by Jessica Mitchell, who's going to be giving us a little bit of a background around the Biosecurity Protection Levy, which was announced in the May federal election series of announcements that came then. So really pleased to have you guys joining us today. We've recorded this session because this Biosecurity Protection Levy will potentially have impacts for our whole sector. And we thought this would be a useful way to get, I guess, the top salient points across to our SIA members so that you can, I guess, have a think about that, how it might impact your industry and your supply chain. Because Jessica is actually running a consultation period which is open until early October. So we have the opportunity as an industry to provide some feedback and input into how this will run. And this video is very much around helping you guys make a more informed decision and provide some recommendations back to SIA, because we will be providing a submission into that process. So Jessica, I might throw across to you just for a brief introduction about yourself, who you are, the role you're in at the moment, and then we'll jump right into the nitty-gritty about what this is all about.
Thank you so much, Julie. Thank you for inviting me with you today. I think this is fantastic, and well done to SIA for being so helpful in getting the message out there and helping your members to provide feedback into the consultation process. So thank you. My name's Jessica Mitchell, for anyone that I haven't met to date. I'm an Assistant Secretary in the Department of Agriculture, Fisheries and Forestry. I have a role that looks after sustainable biosecurity funding, and at the moment we're undertaking public consultation on the arrangements for implementing the Biosecurity Protection Levy. For those that don't know, the Biosecurity Protection Levy is one of the key elements of the government's sustainable biosecurity funding package that was announced in the budget earlier this year. The package it's quite momentous for biosecurity. There's been so much calls for a sustainable funding base for Commonwealth biosecurity over a long time. It's been raised in report after report. I know the industry have been very active in saying we need a sustainably funded, secure system that's not, that's not impacted by the short-term sort of funding profile that we've seen in the past. So it's a big package, over $1 billion over the next 4 years, and then around 260 odd million per year ongoing after the 2027-2028 financial year. So it's big, it means a lot. There's a lot of components of the sustainable biosecurity funding package. The premise is that it's biosecurity is a shared responsibility, and so is contributing to its costs. So we're seeing increased costs for risk creators, and that includes importers and people that engage in international trade, international travellers. So you'll see that the passenger movement charge has been increased by $10 from $60 to $70. We are also implementing a new charge on low value commodities. So goods that come across the border by air or sea freight that are under $1,000 will have a new charge from the 1st of July 2024. The government's committed to transparency and accountability of biosecurity funding. So that's a new annual reporting mechanism that hadn't existed before. And of course, the Biosecurity Protection Levy. So Biosecurity Protection Levy is set to take effect from the 1st of July 2024. It is a levy on beneficiaries of our strong biosecurity system and acknowledges a contribution back to Commonwealth biosecurity activities through the levy. So that's what we're consulting on at the moment. The levy itself is anticipated to generate around $47.5 million in its first year and around $50 million from there. The funding does go into consolidated revenue, which is then appropriated back to the department as part of that sustainable funding base. It is different to statutory agricultural levies and voluntary levies, and I think that's something that we can talk about a little bit more today.
Absolutely.
It is called a levy because, that's that's its name, and legally it's a levy, but it is quite different from the statutory levies and voluntary levies that we have for agricultural, fishery and forestry goods at the moment. So it's a new thing. It will operate, I assume, under new legislation. We're just working through the design and what that means at the moment, and that's what consultation is really helping us with, to make sure that we understand the impacts on people, that we set an appropriate and fair rate, and that the collection mechanisms are sensible and as low impost as possible on all parties. Thanks, Julie. That's an overview.
No worries, thank you. So many questions. So I think, I guess one of the first questions we might get from some of our members is, who will this apply to? Who's going to pay this within industry? And I guess, spoiler alert, this is looking to apply across wild caught and aquaculture, yes?
Correct. Yeah, correct. So around 90% of industries are in the statutory agricultural levies system, and about 10% sit outside. Seafood industries, fishery industries, exactly, are some of the ones, the bigger ones that sit outside. So yes, this is about a fair contribution to the Commonwealth biosecurity system. So we are looking at arrangements for fisheries and seafood producers. So that is aquaculture, that is wild caught, yes. Yeah,
okay. And this differs from, so I think one of the few seafood industries that's currently got a levy, I guess, mechanism in place is around farm prawns. For everyone else, there's no levies in place, is my understanding, across seafood. So how will we describe this is different? Is this more similar, not necessarily to an agricultural levy that people might be familiar with? Is it more similar to something like Medicare levy, where it's
correct? Yeah, there's also levies that people pay. I mean, lots of states and territories and local governments charge different types of levies for different activities, and so this is not a statutory agricultural levy. It's not a contribution towards AHA or PHA. It is not something that is voted on by industry members. This is a government levy. What we want to understand through the consultation is how the collection arrangements would be sensibly applied to commodities. And what we've heard from industries that already engage with the statutory agricultural levy collection system, so like farmed prawns, I think they're the only seafood industry that do. But what we're hearing from those people that operate within that system is they don't want a brand new system developed where they have to report, they have to submit payments to the department. They already engage with levy collection agents and with the department on their existing statutory levy returns. And we're hearing from some of those people that, hey, if you create something new, that's actually going to be a lot of administrative burden on us. And we would prefer that you just calculate the levy and we pay it at the same time. So that is quite different for seafood, and it's something that I want to put out to your members to have a think about, is how would that work for you if you were required to submit a return to the department. I mean, there are ways of doing it online, there's ways of doing it manually, or you could go through a collection agent. How does that proposition work for you, considering that is a new approach?
So I guess for our anyone watching the recording, that's the first point of to pull up and say, okay, we are seeking consultation on, you know, if this process and this levy is going to be implemented across the seafood industry, what are the most logical, cost-effective ways for us to implement and collect that in a way that's not going to add additional burden to businesses? So for those who might not be familiar, I think in the horse industry, they collect levies via sale of worming medication for horses. That's quite different. Horticulture and red meat is often on a per kilo or a per head sale basis, so a transaction-based levy, and some of it can be around value, a percentage of value as well. So there are a variety of of methods there. For horticulture in particular, there are often aggregation points within the supply chain, like a packing house that might service an entire region, and perhaps that's where a levy might be collected for them. So I guess a point of consultation there is seeking to get some advice from people about, well, what might suit the seafood industry. Is there anything you'd like to add to that sort of summary?
No, that's perfect, Julie. That's fantastic. Yeah, that's exactly
Thanks.
what we understand. Where in the supply chain is the most sensible point to calculate and collect the levy, noting that it is different for lots of different commodities. So exactly as you said, cattle, it's usually on a transaction. Some are by kilo of goods produced, some is by tonne, some is by percentage of the sale price. So we want to understand what is a sensible arrangement for the different commodities. I suspect it probably will be on a commodity by commodity basis, considering the nuances and the differences in supply chain. I think the other thing that we would love to get a sense of and feedback on is what a fair rate calculation could be. So the rates of levies are on the department's website. You can see all of them for all of the different commodities and how they're calculated. I mean, for cattle, for instance, so let's say a beast is worth $800 or $900. What we're proposing the biosecurity protection levy to be is 50 cents. So it's a fixed contribution. So we will set the rate at 50 cents. What we want to understand is what is an equitable and fair contribution for the specific commodities. So I think that that's something to also discuss as an industry. We will do some work with ABARES and our colleagues internally, but it is something that we want to engage with industry on, just to make sure that it's not out of step with what other industries are contributing.
Yeah, so I think on your website you had started to look at some initial calculations, and one of the seafood examples was around a prawn farmer may pay an additional 0.00665 or 67 cents per kilo of whole farmed prawns as an example, but that's yet to be determined for prawns and for all the other commodities within the seafood sector as well. So
correct.
Point of seeking some feedback on that as well. I think the listeners would be interested to understand how a little bit more around how this funding would be utilised. So in other industries such as livestock and horticulture, there are existing biosecurity agricultural levies in place already. And these are used for things such as prevention activities, readiness activities, monitoring and surveillance. And levies collected by those industries are invested back to those industries. So levies collected from cattle producers go back to the cattle industry to look at their specific biosecurity challenges, as an example. This one is a little bit different though. So as we said, not an agricultural based levy. You mentioned a little bit earlier around, I guess, oversight, how it would be used, but are you able to elaborate a bit more on that?
Yeah, it's a great question, and something that is raised a lot is, well, what do we get from the Commonwealth biosecurity system? Where will my funding go? Doesn't it just go into consolidated revenue, which is this big black hole, and it never comes back to the department? So that's absolutely not the case. The funding is forming part of the department's base appropriation. So the department's funded by cost recovered activities. So that's where we perform services at the border. So there's a lot of work that goes into risk assessment, targeting, profiling, inspecting and clearing cargo, mail, people at the border. Now, that's one piece of work that the department does. But there's also a lot of work that happens behind the scenes. So we've got a whole lot of technical expertise across the department, particularly in animal, plant and aquatic industries, also environmental biosecurity as well. So there's a lot of that expertise that goes towards undertaking technical discussions with other countries and competent authorities. There's a lot of work that goes into understanding the risk profile for Australia and current emerging risks and changing risk profiles overseas and what that means for us here, how we might need to adjust what we're doing at the border. Are the conditions and the requirements that we have for trade and travel sufficient and in line with our appropriate level of protection? There's a lot of effort that goes into working with states and territories and working with overseas authorities to provide confidence that Australian produce does meet their biosecurity requirements to enable that export trade to happen. So there's a lot that happens. I think that at the moment, we've seen a really good example of it with lumpy skin disease in Indonesia and Malaysia impacting trade. So that's an instance where trade potentially, like huge amounts of trade, could be lost because of a perceived biosecurity issue within Australia. So there's a lot of effort, expertise that can't be cost recovered that happens within the department to work with those overseas authorities to provide confidence in our system and provide them with an assurance that we are disease free. So I think that there's a lot of benefit to the contribution to Commonwealth biosecurity. There's a whole lot of activities that I could rattle off that happens every day in the department, but I think the key point for this is we want your feedback on how we can provide more transparency about the biosecurity system. I think that there's, a lot of people that know that there's some stuff that happens there, but I'm not really quite sure what it is and how it benefits me. We want to understand what would be beneficial for producers to understand and how we can provide that information. So that's part of the consultation process as well, is what does transparency and accountability mean? And what sort of information and understanding of our approach and performance, how will that benefit producers and what do they want to know? So yeah, I think that that's a really important point. People should understand what benefit they get out of the system. There's a lot of material around. There's a national biosecurity strategy. There's Commonwealth Biosecurity 2030. There's a lot of products that articulate what the biosecurity system is, the strategy, and how that benefits people individually. But we can always do better, and we want your feedback on how we can do that.
Awesome, thank you. So another point, I guess, where you're seeking some feedback there around what would be useful in terms of communication back to industry about how this is used. On that topic, a quick fire round maybe. So the funds would not necessarily be used for an emergency response to an exotic disease. That's correct? This is about the operation of the department at a federal level.
Yeah, so there's well-established arrangements for emergency disease responce. So that's funded differently. That is not funded through this ongoing appropriation. I wouldn't say though that none of the resources would go towards that. I mean, I think there's a lot of emergency incident management or emerging issues that effort goes towards nipping in the bud before it gets too big.
That kind of expertise in the department.
Yeah. Exactly. And how do we avoid it getting to a situation where we would need an emergency response? So, I think it's effort absolutely goes towards that, but we're not talking about changing
a direct allocation. Yeah.
Correct. Yeah. Exactly. You're better at describing it than me.
No. Oh no. Well, look, we'll swap. No, that's fine. On that note too, it is staying predominantly at a federal level. So the funds are not necessarily being distributed to the state jurisdictions to execute activities. Is that correct?
No. So this is a contribution towards Commonwealth biosecurity. So the funding is appropriated to the department. I mean, it is different to exactly as you were saying before about the statutory levy system that sees funding dispersed to research development corporations. So FRDC is one of them, marketing, the National Residue Survey, and then Animal Health Australia and Plant Health Australia. This is different. It's going to be, a different system.
Cool. And the funds are not necessarily, so with an agricultural based levy that people might be more familiar with, the funds relating to biosecurity might be managed to some extent through organisations that you mentioned earlier, such as Animal Health Australia and Plant Health Australia. Again, that's not the case with this one, is it? I'm labouring the point now, but it's not an agricultural based levy, so it doesn't operate in the same fashion people might be familiar with.
Yeah, so it's not replacing the contributions that people make to AHA, PHA. It's not replacing the excellent work and investments that people do on-farm biosecurity. And so those elements are really critical and important, and this isn't replacing that. Those things that people do, we absolutely acknowledge. A lot of resources, thought, finances, investment goes into those activities that protect people, on their farm, in their regions, in their industries. That still exists. That is not replacing this, and by no means, by implementing the levy, are we saying that people don't already contribute to the biosecurity system. This is a separate contribution to the Commonwealth biosecurity funding.
Well, thank you. So I think, in summary, you're looking for feedback on a number of things. One is around appropriate collection points within supply chains and businesses that add the least amount of, I guess, additional cost. Another is around the rate calculation, what might be considered appropriate for the different industries. How are you looking to calculate that, I guess, yourselves? Are you looking at historical price-based data from ABARES or?
So look, there's a lot of different ways that we're looking at it. We're working with the ATO and Australian Bureau of Statistics and also ABARES on how we could calculate an equitable rate. So that work's happening at the moment. It is helpful, in some industries do have voluntary levies that can be used. So that's work that we're undergoing at the moment, but we don't want to make those decisions without consulting with industry to make sure that it is logical, fair and appropriate. So we do want the feedback. Also, as part of the consultation process, we are open to meeting with people. So this isn't just all about having, having a written document that's submitted. We are keen over the next 6 to 8 months, when we progress the design and implementation, to meet with those industries that are impacted. So I would encourage your members, if you did want to talk specifically about your industry or your case, work with SIA in the initial instance, but as we progress through design and implementation, we're more than happy to work with you to talk about what it means for you and to make sure that we've got the settings right.
Yeah, that's great. I think a number of our industry specialists would be quite interested in taking you up on that. So, so there is a consultation phase open at the moment with written submissions due on the 6th of October. So SIA, as I mentioned, will be making the submission. We welcome any of our members to provide some feedback to us regarding that after watching the video and having a think about impacts to your industry. To set up any sort of individual consultation around different sectors or to get in touch with your team, Jess, how would people be best to do that?
Yeah, so people are more than welcome to email me directly. Julie, you've got my details. You can pass them on to people.
All right,
if they
I'll
need.
Circulate that. That's a lovely offer. Thank you.
We've also got a secretariat, so an email that my team use. It is all over the website and it's on the consultation paper. So Julie, you can make that available as well.
Yeah.
So I think they're more than welcome to contact me directly or email me or the team. There's a lot of information on the Have Your Say website, so I'd encourage people to go there. There's a consultation paper, there's fact sheets. So if you do have questions, I'd encourage you to go there and just see if the answers already exist, and then feel free to reach out to us. We're also going to host some webinars. So on the 28th and 29th of September, I'll give a plug for that. We are going to host a couple of webinars just to answer some of the frequently asked questions that we've been hearing throughout consultation. Feedback has been really consistent. So we do want to address a lot of those questions kind of head on, so everyone's hearing the same information at the same time from us. Now we do have a sense of what the most commonly flagged questions and issues are. So 28th and 29th, we'll send an invite through, Julie, and you can pass it on.
Fantastic. May I ask a cheeky question, and that I can probably guess, but what are some of the common themes of the feedback that you're getting so far?
Yes, okay. So the headline is people are really encouraged by the achievement of sustainable biosecurity funding. I think that there's like genuine consensus that that's actually a really good thing, and it's something that has been asked for a long time. There's absolutely mixed feelings about the Biosecurity Protection Levy. I think that there's a lot of just general opposition to the concept and to the policy. And we hear that, absolutely feel it. I think that there's a lot of concern about how the levy might be applied and the impacts that that could have to investment in R&D and marketing. I think that industries are generally, they're really concerned about how this may potentially impact profit margins and and how it may impact their businesses. So I would encourage people to have a look at the examples that are in the consultation paper and in the fact sheet. They kind of show exactly what we're talking about. I mean, for apples, like for a kilo, we're talking about less than 1/5 of a cent. So people have been hearing 10%, 10%, 10%. And assuming that this is it's a new GST or it's going to be 10% of the value of production. That is not what we're talking about here. The 10% is it's the starting point of the rate calculation, and it's 10% of the levy rates as at 2020, 2021, where those levy rates are in place. So with the capital example I referred to before, the levy rate at that time was $5 per head. So we're talking about 50 cents per head. So there is a lot of questions about equitability and are we only applying this to current statutory agricultural levy payers? There is a lot of questions about what it means for AHA, PHA operations and contributions. Accountability and transparency, what are those arrangements going to be? How can industries be involved and to have more real-time interaction with the department to discuss risk management? So that's the main pieces of feedback that we've been getting. Obviously, a lot of conversations with specific industries about nuances for them. But yeah, at a high level, that's what we're hearing at the moment.
Thank you. So you mentioned this has got a 1st of July 2024 implementation date. That's really tight, particularly for an industry like ours where we haven't got any frameworks mostly set up. Working backwards, like what are your key dates and timeframes that you're needing to hit that our industry might need to just be aware of?
Yeah, so obviously consultation, it's underway at the moment. We want to get as much feedback as we possibly can to help the design. So one of the commitments of government when they announced the budget measure was that the design and collection arrangements wouldn't be finalised until it was consulted with industry. So this is absolutely genuine, meaningful consultation. We need your feedback in order to make sure that we finalise a design in a way that is sensible. So we will analyse all of the feedback that we get. That's after it closes on the 6th of October. We will be heads down looking at all of that feedback, understanding what it means and modelling what that final design could look like. Once that's been settled, we will put it back to government for approval. And then we'll come back out and obviously discuss with industry what those arrangements will be. There's also legislative implications. So depending on the final design, that will influence whether it's able to be implemented under existing legislation or whether new legislation is required. That obviously has to go through its processes. There's a lot of technical work that needs to happen with our IT systems to collect the levy and also with levy collection agents and software providers. So a lot of stuff to happen. It is doable. It is very, very tight. It is very complex. But I think the next milestone for industries is to provide feedback into the consultation. We'll consider it. We'll come out and discuss if we've got any questions, and then we'll come back out to people with what that final design looks like. That'll be before the end of this year, I would assume.
Okay. Cool. You've got your work cut out for you over the next few months. You're going to be an expert in all of these industries by the time you're done. So I think that pretty much exhausts my questions. I just want to say thank you so much for your time and allowing me to pepper you with questions. Are there any sort of final points you'd like to add? We will circulate this recording along with contact information, relevant dates, the webinar links that are coming up, that type of thing.
No, I don't think there's anything more. I just wanted to really thank you, Julie, for giving us the opportunity to do this. It's been really helpful in meeting with your members and with industries to understand the impacts, and also to get feedback on the biosecurity system and Commonwealth biosecurity generally. I
Yes.
think with feedback, I mean, a lot of feedback that has been put forward is not necessarily about the operation of the levy. It's suggestions on how we could improve communications and how we could improve the biosecurity system. So we are all ears for that. If you do have thoughts that you want to put forward, I will take them and I'll pass them on to the relevant people in the department. But I just want to thank you for the opportunity. Thank your members for their interest. And I appreciate this is difficult and is not necessarily welcome, but I want to assure people that we want to make sure that arrangements are sensible, pragmatic, and we are absolutely open to your feedback and your suggestions on how we could do that. So thank you.
No worries. Thanks again. Final wrap up. You're looking for feedback on collection points, rates that make sense for the different commodities, how to provide additional transparency, and while we're on the topic anyway, any great suggestions on how to improve the biosecurity system more generally, which does not necessarily sit with you, but you will pass on to the relevant bodies. And key dates to hit, submission date by 6th of October. Well, that is all. Thank you so much again, and hopefully we'll be able to provide some really useful feedback through to you for this process. All right, I've stopped